I know that there was some concern that this may have been an active shooter. We responded as if it was an active shooter. I can tell you right now it was not an active shooter. We're currently asking the public's help in locating a suspect, a potential suspect in this case. It's a male unknown race wearing all dark clothing and a black hoodie that fled the scene. Should anyone have any information about that individual or what occurred today on campus, please give us a call at 510-238-3821.
Have time for a few questions, guys.
Do you know the relationship with the suspect and the victim, and who was the victim possibly football coach?
So it's actively a current investigation right now. We do have investigators on scene as well as crime scene technicians, and we're interviewing people. So I can't get into the details of the investigation or where we're at right now specifically about that.
Was the person shot an employee at the district?
I can just tell you that the victim was located on campus, but I'm not going to elaborate on their employment status or their identity.
Do we know if the suspect involved, there was any type of altercation before the shooting happened, or was this kind of, a surprise just happened?
So that's something that we still have to kind of work through. We are interviewing witnesses. We're looking at surveillance footage, and we're going to leverage some technology on that piece to kind of get to there.
No word on how long he had been on campus, though?
No, we're still looking at that as well.
Are you able to discern or say right now looks to be a targeted as opposed to a random?
Again, it's an active investigation. I don't want to taint the investigation or jeopardize it in any way. Currently, we are interviewing people that are on scene, and there's going to be additional interviews that are going to be taking place here shortly.
Can you tell us if
That will have to, again, we're not there right now. The investigation that'll help us figure that piece out.
Do you know where this happened on campus and how many people were around at the time?
So I can't reveal where exactly it happened on campus. Again, that's going to be part of the investigation, and I don't want to jeopardize someone's account of what they saw or heard.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A beloved football coach who sent over 20 players to the NFL was shot dead at his own college fieldhouse by a former student who believed the coach had used witchcraft on him. John Beam, 66, had mentored thousands of young men over 4 decades, appeared on Netflix's Last Chance U, and retired just months earlier as one of Oakland's most respected figures. His killer, Cedric Irving Jr., walked onto Laney College campus in broad daylight, targeted Beam specifically, and shot him multiple times before calmly walking away. Irving confessed within hours, admitting he'd planned the attack because he thought Beam had cursed him. The evidence is overwhelming. The confession is on tape, and the motive is as bizarre as it is tragic. This is the John Beam case. John Walter Beam was 66 years old and had spent his entire adult life coaching football. He wasn't just any coach. He was a Bay Area legend who had shaped the lives of thousands of young men and sent more than 20 players to the NFL. Beam's coaching record speaks for itself. At Skyline High School in Oakland, where he coached from 1993 to 2014, he posted a 160-33-3 record. He led Skyline to 3 league championships and built a program that became a pipeline to college and professional football. Players who went through Beam's program included NFL stars like Marshawn Lynch, who would later credit Beam as a father figure and mentor. After Skyline, Beam moved to Laney College in Oakland, where he continued coaching and eventually became athletic director. At Laney, he racked up over 130 wins and maintained his reputation for developing talent and changing lives. In 2020, Beam was featured in Season 5 of Netflix's documentary series Last Chance U, Oakland, which followed the Laney College football program and showcased Beam's coaching style and dedication to his players. But Beam's impact went far beyond wins and losses. He was known throughout Oakland as someone who genuinely cared about young men, particularly those from difficult backgrounds. He was a father figure to players who didn't have one at home, a counselor who helped navigate college applications and life decisions, and a constant presence who stayed in touch with former players for decades after they left his programs. Beam had retired from coaching in 2024, but remained at Laney College as athletic director, still showing up every day to support student athletes and maintain the programs he'd built. He was at work on the morning of November 13th, 2025, doing what he'd always done, being present for his students. That morning would be his last. Cedric Irving Jr. was 27 years old and living in the Bay Area. Irving had played high school football at Skyline High School from 2016 to 2017, but this was after Beam had left Skyline for Laney College. So Beam never coached Irving at the high school level. What connected Irving to Beam was Laney College. In 2022, Irving enrolled at Laney and took at least one course under Beam, a class called Fundamentals of Football. This means Irving had direct contact with Beam as a student, though the exact nature of their relationship during this time isn't fully documented in public records. According to investigators, Irving was known to loiter around the Laney College campus even after he was no longer actively enrolled. Campus security and staff had seen him hanging around the fieldhouse and athletic facilities, though this hadn't been considered threatening at the time. In the weeks leading up to the shooting, Irving's life had taken some difficult turns. He had recently lost his job as a security guard after being involved in an altercation. He was also facing eviction from his apartment. According to court documents and police statements, Irving had no prior criminal record, no arrests, no violent history, nothing that would have predicted what was about to happen. But Irving had developed a deeply troubling belief. He was convinced that John Beam had used witchcraft on him. This wasn't a passing thought or a joke. Irving genuinely believed that Beam had somehow cursed or used supernatural powers against him and other students. Where this belief came from isn't entirely clear from public records, but investigators would later learn that this delusion had been building in Irving's mind and had become the foundation for what he was planning to do. Irving had no documented mental health treatment history or previous psychotic episodes in the public record, but his statements to police would reveal someone who constructed an entire narrative around Beam as a threat. Not a physical threat, but a supernatural one. The relationship between Irving and Beam was that of a former student and teacher. There's no evidence in public records of any conflict between them during the 2022 timeframe when Irving took Beam's Fundamentals of Football course. No documented arguments, no disciplinary issues, no complaints filed by either party. But something had clearly shifted in Irving's mind. According to what Irving would later tell police, he had come to believe that Beam was using witchcraft or some form of supernatural power against him and potentially other students. Irving told investigators that this belief had solidified to the point where he felt he needed to act. The days leading up to November 13th aren't fully detailed in public records, but what is documented paints a picture of someone planning a very specific act. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a sudden break with reality. Irving would later admit to police that he had planned the attack. On November 13th, 2025, Irving made his way to Laney College. He knew the campus well from his time as a student and from his habit of hanging around the athletic facilities. He knew where Beam would be. He knew Beam's routines. According to police, Irving brought a loaded firearm with him, a gun that was registered to him legally. It was around noon when Irving arrived at the Laney College fieldhouse. The fieldhouse was Beam's domain, the place where he'd spent decades coaching, mentoring, and building his programs. On this particular day, there were other people around. Students, staff, and athletes were in the area going about their normal activities. Irving walked into the fieldhouse knowing exactly who he was looking for. According to witness statements that would later be given to police, Irving didn't seem agitated or rushed. He moved with purpose, looking for John Beam. If you're following this case closely, make sure you subscribe to True Crime Lures so you don't miss updates as the legal proceedings move forward. Around noon on Thursday, November 13th, 2025, Cedric Irving Jr. found John Beam inside the Laney College fieldhouse. According to witnesses and police reports, there was a brief interaction between the two men. A source close to the investigation later reported that Beam could be heard saying, "No, no, no," before the shooting began. This suggests Beam may have recognized Irving and realized what was about to happen, or that Irving said something that made Beam understand he was in danger. Irving fired multiple shots. The exact number hasn't been publicly specified in court documents, but witnesses reported hearing gunfire and seeing Beam fall. The shooting occurred inside the fieldhouse with other people present in the building, though whether anyone witnessed the actual shooting hasn't been fully detailed in public reports. John Beam, 66 years old, collapsed from his gunshot wounds. He was critically injured, and the wounds were severe enough that emergency responders immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. After shooting Beam, Irving didn't run. He didn't panic. According to police, he calmly walked away from the fieldhouse, left the Laney College campus, and disappeared into Oakland. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Beam was rushed to Highland Hospital in Oakland, where trauma surgeons worked to save his life. The wounds were catastrophic. Beam had been shot multiple times, and despite the efforts of medical staff, the injuries were too severe. John Beam died at Highland Hospital on Friday, November 14th, 2025, at approximately 10 a.m., less than 24 hours after being shot. A man who had dedicated his life to helping young people, who had sent dozens of players to the NFL, who had mentored thousands, was dead because someone believed he'd used witchcraft. The timing of Beam's death is particularly tragic in another way. November 13th, the day Beam was shot, was the same day that Skyline High School, where Beam had coached for over 2 decades, experienced a separate shooting incident. Students from Skyline had been on a field trip to Laney College that day and found themselves on lockdown for the second time in 24 hours. The Oakland school community was reeling from 2 shootings in 2 days at institutions deeply connected to Beam's legacy. But while the Skyline shooting involved students in a different set of circumstances, the Laney shooting was laser-focused and deliberate. Irving had come to campus specifically to kill John Beam, and he'd succeeded. Oakland Police Department responded to reports of a shooting at Laney College around noon on November 13th. When officers arrived at the field house, they found John Beam critically wounded and began immediate efforts to secure the scene and identify the shooter. The investigation moved quickly. Police reviewed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage from cameras around the Laney College campus and surrounding areas. The footage showed Irving entering campus, approaching the field house, and leaving after shooting. According to Oakland Police Chief Floyd Mitchell, investigators worked through the night, reviewing video evidence and conducting witness interviews. The surveillance footage was clear enough to identify Irving, and witnesses who knew Irving from his time around campus were able to confirm his identity. Within hours, police had identified Cedric Irving Jr. as the suspect. They put out a description of Irving and began searching for him across the Bay Area. Irving didn't get far. In the early morning hours of Friday, November 14th, while John Beam was still alive but dying in the hospital, police located Irving at the San Leandro BART station. The arrest happened around 3 to 4 a.m., roughly 15 hours after shooting. When Oakland police arrested Irving, they found the murder weapon still in his possession. He was carrying a bag that contained the firearm, a gun that was legally registered to Irving. He hadn't disposed of the weapon, hadn't tried to hide it, and made no attempt to distance himself from the evidence. What happened next is what makes this case particularly straightforward from an evidence standpoint. Irving confessed. In interviews with detectives, Irving admitted to shooting John Beam. He told police that he had targeted Beam specifically and deliberately, and then he explained why. He believed John Beam had used witchcraft on him. Irving told investigators that Beam had somehow cursed him or used supernatural powers against him and possibly other students. He claimed this belief had motivated him to go to Laney College with a loaded gun and shoot Beam multiple times. Irving admitted to police that he had planned the attack. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a sudden confrontation that escalated. The confession was recorded. Irving acknowledged pulling the trigger. He acknowledged bringing the gun to campus. He acknowledged targeting Beam specifically. The only dispute wasn't whether Irving had killed Beam, but why, and Irving's explanation of witchcraft would become the central issue moving forward. The physical evidence supported every element of Irving's confession. Ballistics testing confirmed that the bullets that killed John Beam came from Irving's registered firearm. The surveillance footage showed Irving at the scene during the time of the shooting. Witnesses placed Irving at the field house. The gun was recovered from Irving's possession less than a day after murder. According to Oakland Police Chief Floyd Mitchell, the shooting was very targeted. Mitchell told reporters that this wasn't a random act of violence or dispute that got out of hand. Irving had gone to Laney College specifically to kill John Beam, and the evidence showed careful planning and deliberate action. The investigation also revealed that Irving had been seen loitering around Laney College campus in the days and weeks before the shooting. Campus security had noticed him hanging around the athletic facilities, though he wasn't considered a threat at the time. This suggested Irving had been watching Beam, learning his routines and preparing for the attack. By the time John Beam died on Friday morning at 10 a.m., the case against Cedric Irving Jr. was already airtight. The confession, the physical evidence, the surveillance footage, and the witness statements all pointed to the same conclusion. Irving had murdered John Beam in cold blood over a delusional belief in witchcraft. Cedric Irving Jr. was formally charged with murder in the death of John Beam. The charge carries a potential sentence of 50 years to life in California State Prison if Irving is convicted. Irving's first court appearance came on Monday, November 17, 2025, 3 days after Beam's death. He appeared via video link, and the arraignment was brief. Irving entered a not guilty plea through his attorney. On Tuesday, November 18th, Irving appeared in court again for a preliminary hearing. This appearance drew significant attention, including the presence of Marshawn Lynch, who sat in the courtroom to observe the proceedings against the man accused of murdering his former coach. At the November 18th hearing, prosecutors began laying out the evidence against Irving. They presented surveillance footage showing Irving entering Laney College campus and approaching the fieldhouse around the time of the shooting. They described Irving's confession to police, including his admission that he had targeted Beam specifically and his claim about witchcraft being the motive. The prosecution emphasized several key points. Irving had planned the attack. He had brought a loaded firearm to campus. He had specifically sought out John Beam, and he had shot Beam multiple times in a deliberate act of violence. Prosecutors noted that Irving's own words to police demonstrated premeditation. This wasn't a spontaneous act or an accident. The defense indicated they would likely focus on Irving's mental state at the time of the shooting. Irving's belief that Beam had used witchcraft on him suggests potential mental health issues, and the defense may argue that Irving was experiencing delusions or psychotic break that affected his ability to form the intent necessary for a murder conviction. However, prosecutors have strong evidence to counter an insanity defense. Irving's actions before and after the shooting show planning and awareness. He knew where to find Beam. He brought a weapon. He successfully navigated the campus to reach his target. After the shooting, he left the scene and evaded police for several hours before being arrested with the weapon still in his possession. These facts suggest someone who understood what they were doing and attempted to get away with it, even if their motive was based on delusional beliefs. The court set Irving's bail at a substantial amount, though the exact figure hasn't been widely reported. Given the severity of the charge, the strength of the evidence, and the fact that Irving poses a potential danger to the community, he's being held in custody awaiting trial. At the November 18th hearing, the judge found sufficient probable cause to proceed with the case and scheduled further court dates. Irving remains in Santa Rita Jail in Dublin, California, as the case moves through the pretrial process. The question of Irving's mental state will likely be central to his defense strategy, but it faces significant obstacles. California law requires more than just mental illness or delusional thinking to establish an insanity defense. The defense must prove that Irving didn't understand the nature of his actions or didn't know they were wrong. The evidence suggests Irving knew exactly what he was doing, understood that shooting someone would kill them, and took deliberate steps to carry out the attack. His delusional motive doesn't necessarily mean he meets the legal standard for insanity. The case is expected to move toward trial in 2026, though specific dates haven't been set. Oakland County District Attorney's Office has made clear they intend to prosecute Irving to the fullest extent of the law. Stay with True Crime Lures as this case develops. We'll bring you updates from every court appearance and break down what the evidence means for the prosecution and defense. John Beam's murder had immediate ripple effects beyond just the courtroom proceedings against Cedric Irving Jr. The shooting prompted Oakland officials and prosecutors to re-examine policies around gun violence and school safety. Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price announced that in response to the shooting and the broader pattern of gun violence in Oakland, her office would reinstate mandatory minimum sentences for crimes committed with firearms. This represented a significant policy shift, as Price had previously moved away from mandatory minimums as part of a progressive approach to criminal justice reform. The decision to reinstate mandatory minimums specifically in gun cases reflected the community's frustration with ongoing violence and the particularly shocking nature of Beam's murder. Price emphasized that gun crimes would now face stricter sentencing guidelines, signaling to potential offenders that violence with firearms would result in substantial prison time without the possibility of lighter sentences through plea deals. The shooting also raised serious questions about campus security at Laney College. The fact that Irving had been seen loitering around campus multiple times before the shooting, and that he was able to walk onto campus with a loaded firearm and reach Beam without being stopped, highlighted gaps in security protocols. Particularly troubling was the revelation that Beam himself had raised concerns about campus safety just one day before he was killed. On November 12th, less than 24 hours before Irving shot him, Beam had reportedly expressed worries about security at the athletic facilities to college administrators. The specific nature of those concerns hasn't been fully detailed in public records, but the timing is haunting. Beam sensed something was wrong, and the next day he was murdered. Laney College administrators didn't immediately respond to questions about what security measures were in place at the time of the shooting or what changes might be implemented going forward. The college released statements expressing grief over Beam's death, but hasn't publicly addressed the security questions raised by the case. The broader Oakland community grappled with the fact that 2 school shootings had occurred on the same day, November 13th, one at Skyline High School and one at Laney College. Both institutions were deeply connected to Beam's legacy, and the violence hitting both places in a single day underscored Oakland's ongoing struggle with gun violence affecting schools and students. John Beam was 66 years old. He had spent 40 years coaching football and shaping the lives of young men in Oakland. He had sent more than 20 players to the NFL. He had won over 290 games as a head coach. He had mentored thousands of students who considered him a father figure. He had appeared on Netflix and could have been enjoying a comfortable retirement, but instead chose to stay at Laney College as athletic director because he loved being around young people and helping them succeed. Instead, he died on a hospital bed less than 24 hours after being shot by a former student who believed in witchcraft. Beam's family lost a husband, father, and grandfather. His players lost a mentor who had stayed in their lives long after they left his programs. The Oakland community lost one of its most respected figures. Laney College lost the heart of its athletic department. The impact of Beam's death extends beyond his immediate circle. He represented a certain kind of coach, one who saw players as whole people, not just athletes. He stayed in touch with former players for decades. He showed up for their life events. He was a constant, stabilizing presence for young men who often came from unstable backgrounds. That kind of mentorship and consistent care is irreplaceable. Cedric Irving Jr. sits in Santa Rita jail awaiting trial. He faces 50 years to life in prison if convicted of murder. His confession is on tape. The physical evidence is overwhelming. The surveillance footage shows him at the scene. The gun was found in his possession. Unless something dramatic changes, Irving will spend the rest of his life in prison for murdering a man who had dedicated his life to helping people like Irving. Irving's young child is growing up knowing their father killed someone. Irving's family is dealing with the reality that he committed an act of brutal violence. And for what? A delusional belief that has no basis in reality. John Beam wasn't using witchcraft on anyone. He was just a football coach who showed up to work every day trying to help students. The case raises difficult questions about mental health, delusions, and violence. Irving had no documented history of psychotic episodes or violent behavior. He passed background checks to legally own a firearm. Nothing in his public record suggested he was dangerous. Yet somewhere in his mind, he constructed a narrative that John Beam was a threat that needed to be eliminated, and he acted on that delusion with deadly consequences. Several questions remain unanswered in this case. What exactly led Irving to develop this belief about witchcraft? Was there a specific incident or interaction that triggered this delusion, or did it build gradually over time? Were there warning signs that people around Irving missed? Did Irving reach out to anyone for help before the shooting, or keep his delusions entirely private? The legal proceedings will likely explore Irving's mental health history more thoroughly as the defense builds its case. Mental health evaluations will be conducted, and experts may testify about Irving's state of mind. But the fundamental question remains. Even if Irving genuinely believed Beam had cursed him, does that absolve him of responsibility for planning and carrying out a deliberate murder? The answer from prosecutors is clear. No. Irving may have been delusional, but he knew how to load a gun, knew where to find Beam, knew that shooting someone would kill them, and took deliberate steps to murder a man who posed no actual threat to him. That's not insanity. That's murder motivated by a false belief. John Beam dedicated his life to building up young men, particularly those who society had written off or overlooked. He gave them structure, discipline, mentorship, and genuine care. He changed lives through football and through simply being present and believing in people. Cedric Irving Jr. took that life over a delusion. A coach who spent 40 years helping people was shot dead by someone who believed in witchcraft instead of getting mental health treatment. That's the tragedy at the core of this case. A senseless murder that destroyed not just John Beam's life, but the countless lives he would continue to impact if he'd lived to see 67, 70, 75, or beyond. The trial is expected to begin in 2026. The evidence is overwhelming. And Oakland continues to mourn a legend who should still be walking the sidelines at Laney College, mentoring the next generation of young men who needed him. John Beam's death devastated the Oakland community and the broader football world. Beam had touched thousands of lives over 4 decades of coaching, and the response to his murder reflected just how many people considered him a mentor and father figure. Marshawn Lynch, the NFL running back who played for Beam at Skyline High School, was among those who spoke publicly about Beam's impact. Lynch had often credited Beam with shaping his life and career, and Beam's death hit Lynch hard. Lynch would later show up at court proceedings related to the case, a testament to the lasting bond between coach and player. Laney College held a vigil for Beam, where students, former players, staff, and community members gathered to honor his memory. Speaker after speaker talked about Beam's dedication, his genuine care for young men, and his ability to change lives through football and mentorship. Many former players flew back to Oakland to pay respects to the man who had believed in them. Social media filled with tributes from former players and colleagues. The common theme in these posts was Beam's role as more than just a coach. He was a constant presence in players' lives, someone who checked in years after they graduated, who showed up for weddings and graduations, who never stopped caring. The Oakland Unified School District released a statement mourning Beam's death and acknowledging his decades of service to Oakland students. Skyline High School, where Beam had built a legendary program, held its own memorial service. But Beam's death also sparked difficult conversations about safety at Oakland schools. The fact that Beam was shot at Laney College, a place where he'd worked for years and should have been safe, raised questions about campus security. Particularly troubling was the fact that Irving had been seen loitering around campus multiple times before the shooting, without being stopped or questioned more thoroughly. Even more jarring was the timing. Beam was shot on the same day Skyline High School experienced a separate shooting. Students from Skyline had been on a field trip to Laney College and found themselves on lockdown twice in 24 hours. First at their own school, then at the college where their former legendary coach had just been murdered. The double trauma highlighted the ongoing crisis of gun violence affecting Oakland schools and the students trying to learn in them. The Oakland community was grieving not just the loss of John Beam, but what his death represented: violence reaching into spaces that should be safe, and a senseless murder motivated by delusions rather than any real conflict.